Hi, fellow seekers. How's everyone doing? Well, Chad Doerman is back. And look at him. Bless his heart. He has his street attire that he requested. Do you think it makes him look any less of a monster? Or make him any less of a monster? I'll let you all be the judge of that. But the last video I put out, he was requesting that the judge toss out his confession for a few reasons. Apparently, they just had a hearing on that. It actually popped up last evening on Law and Crime, so this just occurred. So the thing that Doerman is asking for is for the judge to toss out his confession, because according to him and his attorneys, his rights were violated. Apparently, the police didn't read his entire Miranda order, but according to the police, his response, his answers to questions were a bit ambiguous. He said something to the effect about having a lawyer, but that didn't pan out. And they said that his request for a lawyer was not made clear to them. And in that he first admitted that he had planned all of this, but then he denied it. So there lies, I guess, the problem. But is it a problem? I mean, even, I guess, if the judge were to toss it out, I mean, I think it's pretty clear. His wife and stepdaughter witnessed it. A neighbor witnessed it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the police not, maybe they didn't feel like the police treated him properly. I think one of them, and we'll show it here just a minute, admits that he told him to shut the F up because he had the right to remain silent, and maybe he'd better do that. And there were some other, I guess, disparaging remarks that police made. But then on the other hand, as one of them testified, I'm not a robot. And just imagine the horrific scene they came upon, and Chad just being so nonchalant, and dog isn't going to hurt anybody. And he was just like, I'm just, oh, could I get up? I'm a little uncomfortable. I think that irritated him because he's sitting there talking about his discomfort after what he did to those 3 beautiful boys. So I get it. But the question is, will the judge toss it out? According to this, in this hearing, he has not yet tossed it out. But I guess the defense still has things that they want to put forth to the judge. So let's take a listen.
I told him to shut up, and also during that, I told him he had the right to remain silent and use it.
Deputies on the stand as the Ohio dad accused of executing his 3 young sons claims detectives violated his rights. We have the top moments from the hearing in Chad Doerman's case. I'm Antoinette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Chad Doerman could be put to death if he's convicted of murdering his 3 young sons, Clayton, Hunter, and Chase, at his home in Claremont County last June. What Doerman's accused of doing is absolutely unthinkable. Prosecutors say Doerman made multiple statements, including, "I did it, take me to jail, and I shouldn't have done that." But Doerman's lawyers say the detectives violated their client's rights when they questioned him in several ways. They claim Doerman asked for a lawyer, and detectives ignored that request. At a hearing this week, deputies and detectives were questioned about how they handled Doerman, beginning with him being taken into custody.
I told him he had the right to remain silent and use it.
Okay. I'm sorry, what was that last comment? You said
I told him he had the right to remain silent and use it.
Okay. And did he respond to you, sir?
He did.
And what did he say?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what did you take that yes, sir, to mean?
That he understood I didn't want him to talk.
So after Doerman arrived at the sheriff's office, he was placed in an interview room. Detective Michael Ross testified about reading Doerman his Miranda Rights from a card, but he didn't read the entire card. Take a listen.
I want to talk about advice. before you question. The others talk about having a lawyer present during questioning, isn't it?
Yes. I'm not a robot. I probably should have read the entire card, but I'm not a robot.
And then you read, if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed that you left out for you before any questioning if you wish, right?
Again, yes, I must have left that out.
So that's a little concerning. In a triple homicide, you should probably read the entire card word for word to ensure you're dotting all of your I's and crossing all of your T's, to ensure you've read the suspect his rights and that he understands them. The questioning by Doerman's attorney continued.
Because I believed that he wanted to talk to me based on our short interaction earlier in the interview where I said that I wanted to talk to him, and he said, that's fine. Actually, I said, I want to talk to you if that's okay, and he said, that's fine.
Were you afraid he was going to say no?
No,
I talk to you?
No, I wasn't afraid. I'm just not a robot. I didn't read the card word for word. I read to him his Miranda Rights and Miranda warnings.
How many interviews do you think you've done today?
Probably hundreds as a detective and probably thousands as a road patrol.
Assistant Prosecutor Laura Barone Allen asked Detective Ross about other statements Doerman made during the interview.
He had made a comment that the Bible says that you kill your firstborn, you kill your secondborn, you kill your thirdborn, but first you're supposed to kill your wife. I didn't kill my wife. So I really thought that was a very important comment that he had just made, and I wanted him to repeat to me some of the things that he had said, and I was asking him about that, and he cut me off. He stopped me from talking and said, I'll just, in all in one sentence, he says, I'll just wait for a lawyer. I really don't know. Like, give me a couple days, I'll talk to a lawyer and get nice, good answers. He says that all in basically one breath.
So Detective Ross, he revealed a lot there, but at the end you heard him say that Chad Doerman said that he would talk with a lawyer and get, quote, good answers. Ross went on explaining what he said happened with Doerman when it came to this discussion about a lawyer.
I felt obligated to explore it a little bit, yes. So I did. I asked him if he had a lawyer.
And what did he indicate to you?
He said, we have family lawyers.
And did you follow up on that?
Yeah, again, I felt like pulling teeth. I'm trying to get him to talk about it. Tell me, who's your lawyer? So I asked him if there was somebody we could call. And he said, Keith Doerman and Ruby Franklin.
And did he give you any information about those two individuals?
Yes, I followed up with them. Keith Doerman is his father, and neither one of those people are attorneys.
So he was able to tell you Keith Doerman is his dad. What did he say about Ruby Franklin?
He said that she was in the CIA, and I said, well, is she a lawyer in the CIA? And he said, she's in the CIA. So neither name that he gave me were even close to lawyers.
When questioned by Doerman's lawyers, Detective Ross said Doerman's request for a lawyer wasn't exactly clear to him.
So what do you understand you're supposed to do when a suspect who's in custody clearly asks for a lawyer?
If they clearly ask for a lawyer,
Yeah.
which I've done on other cases, on other homicide cases, they clearly ask for a lawyer, I stop questioning them,
Right.
which I've done before.
Stop
In this case, he did not clearly say he wanted a lawyer.
But you said that you tried to clarify with him. That's what you're saying these questions you asked him about. Whether he had a lawyer or not were designed to do.
I did try to explore that and clarify his comments, but he continued playing games with me.
While prosecutors say Doerman admitted to shooting his 3 sons, they also say he denied it.
And at any point during the interview, did the defendant deny shooting his sons that day?
Yes, multiple times throughout the entire interview till the very end.
It also came out that Doerman was captured on camera saying a number of other things.
He said, almost like under his breath, like a whisper, what the did I do? Another point he says, what the did she let me do? Another time it looked like he was checking the back of his shirt for blood. There was another point where he's looking around and he says, "Where's the cameras? Where's the cameras?" So he was looking for cameras.
And Doerman's defense attorneys dropped a little bit of a hint about what they might claim at trial.
You've dealt with mentally ill people before?
For 26 years, I've dealt with mentally ill people, yes.
Do you understand sometimes they're not dealing in reality?
I believe that's probably true, yeah.
You
Sometimes they're
understand
not.
what psychosis is?
Well, now you're getting outside of my knowledge of mentally ill people.
Okay. So do you accept that sometimes mentally ill people will behave in ways that may seem like one thing when it's not?
In my experiences, and again, as a police officer, my experiences dealing with mentally ill people typically don't know that they're mentally ill.
Judge Richard Farring did not rule on the defense request to throw out Chad Doerman's statement. He could do that in the next month or so. The prosecutor in this case, Mark Tacalvi, has made it clear he will not settle for anything less than having Chad Doerman executed. So what does all of this testimony mean for this murder case? Mark Weaver has prosecuted death penalty cases in the state of Ohio, and he's a former deputy Ohio attorney general. Mark, first off, let's talk about this issue about the Miranda waiver card and what the detective in this case said he read to Chad Doerman. He said he didn't read the whole card. Is he required to read the entire card? Because the suggestion is that Chad Doerman may not have understood all of his rights under the circumstances, and that the cops messed up when they were sitting there trying to read his rights and they don't read every little word on the card.
Yeah, defense counsel here doesn't have much to work with. I prosecuted a couple death penalty cases against the lead death penalty lawyer, in this case, Greg Myers. I saw him in the hearing. And they often have very little angles they can pursue. So at the suppression hearing, they're trying to stop the confession from coming in. We all know there's lots of evidence he did this. This is not some other dude did it defense. Everybody knows who did it. But it's the job of the defense to try to impede or slow down or otherwise delay the state's case. And this latest hack is the notion that the Miranda card was not read from. Miranda comes from the U.S. Supreme Court, Miranda versus Arizona. That decision and its other case law that came from it don't require a police officer to read the rights from a card, but it is the best practice. A police officer who always reads from the card, word for word, will have an easier time in future suppression hearings than one who looks at it and summarizes the main point. The standard is, did the officer warn the defendant of the key messages from the Miranda warning, which we're all familiar with from TV? It sounds as though that they did. The judge will make the final decision.
Another concern here, watching this hearing, was the fact that the detective on the stand testifying said, he said stuff about a lawyer, and this is under questioning by the defense. He said stuff about a lawyer, and then it sounded like he said Laura, and so I was confused. But there was mention of a lawyer and possibly wanting a lawyer by Chad Doerman. So I always thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, that once a defendant mentions a lawyer, the questioning should stop. And, it's kind of incumbent upon the detective in the room to say, wait, are you asking for a lawyer? But the defense is saying, you didn't do that. You didn't ask that clarifying question. Your response to that?
Two things can be true at the same time. First, it is black letter law. That means it's well settled law that when a defendant who's in a custodial interrogation, which the defendant was in this case, makes a clear request to speak to a lawyer before answering any other questions, that the questioning must stop. That's no doubt that's the law. The question for this judge is whether that's what happened in this particular interrogation. The facts, as I understand them, show that the defendant was kind of vague, wasn't very clear, made a reference to a lawyer and then immediately followed up with, well, I don't know, and then talked about some people who could be lawyers. Turns out they weren't lawyers. One was his father. Someone works for the CIA. Frankly, I didn't quite follow it. Some of this could be construed as confused mutterings by this defendant. And so this judge will have to decide whether that was enough to stop the interrogation. The prosecution early in the hearing pointed out several different phrases involving lawyers that were so vague that Ohio courts have said that's not enough to trigger the requirement to stop the questioning. So the judge is going to have to read those cases and decide whether or not that was enough to stop the question.
So you're saying the defendant has to basically say, I want a lawyer. Like it has to be a clear request. You can't just start talking about a lawyer.
All of us have rights under the Constitution, but we also have obligations to make known whether or not we're waiving those rights or whether we're standing on those rights. Officers do not have to be mind readers. The judge, I think, is going to find that the combination of words that this defendant said was not enough to stop the question.
There was also some testimony by some of the deputies who arrived on the scene. And, you know, you and I have talked about this before, that the defense took issue with the fact that I think one of the deputies said, you know, close the door, you know, when they put Doerman in the cruiser, close the door so I don't kill the mother effer and stuff like that. They were cursing and you know, that was like an intimidation tactic. Do the courts really care about that? Is there any case law on deputies and cursing at and, you know, making their disdain known for a suspect, especially when they arrive on the scene and see 3 young children dead?
Deputies are human, and they're going to react as humans do, particularly in this horrific case. Of course, the founders of our country who wrote the Constitution wanted to make sure that interrogations didn't look like the torture chambers of Europe. And that's why they wrote some of the things they did in the Bill of Rights. The only reason I think they're raising this defense counsel is to suggest that somehow this was some abusive process of this defendant that perhaps forced him into confessing. Calling him a name, slamming the door, not adjusting the cuffs to his liking, not adjusting the air conditioning to his liking. This is nowhere near the sort of abusive environment that might trigger some judge ruling to hold back the interrogation from evidence.
And finally, Mark, there was some discussion about HIPAA and the fact that Chad Doerman received some care from medical professionals and that there were body cameras rolling during all of this, and that should not be used according to the defense. That shouldn't be allowed at trial because he was in a medical setting, even though he was in custody, so that anything he said there shouldn't be used against him. Your response to that?
These defense lawyers have very little to work with, so let's give them an A for creativity. I've not seen HIPAA raised in a suppression hearing before. I'm not even quite sure what I'm not sure what they're trying to achieve here. Early on in the hearing, one of them acknowledged it would not be a basis for suppression. Suppression hearings are supposed to be when constitutional issues are raised, typically Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment constitutional issues. HIPAA is a federal statute that provides privacy in health communications that are stored digitally. And as the state mentioned, there's an exception in HIPAA for people who are in jail or prison. So I don't think the judge will do much with that. It struck me as an odd thing to bring up. But remember, I've not been a defense lawyer. I've always been on the prosecution side. These defense lawyers don't have much to work with, and they're trying to do what they can for their client.
So there you have it. Well, my opinion, probably most of yours too. I mean, how were the officers supposed to react? I know they have to kind of keep it together, but that was an unusually horrific situation to come onto the scene and see that. And Doerman just acting so matter of fact. And obviously he's going for the insanity plea that they all go for. Well, I mean, you do have to think that someone has to be insane to do something like that. But it does sound like he planned it, but I guess they don't want that to enter into the evidence. I guess we will see what happens. But the biggest thing here, aside from my disdain for Chad Doerman, is the fact that we need justice for Clayton, Hunter, and Chase, and his mom and stepsister. Because what a horrible thing to have to live with, that horrible loss. And again, it's sometimes I feel like the defendants have more rights than the victims. And I know, we got to follow the rules of the court and blah, 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 the rights. But sometimes it's a little hard during this type of situation. But I wanted to make sure you all had an update on this. And thank you all, as always, for watching, commenting, subscribing. I'll see you all soon. Be kind to others. Be kind to you. I love you. And I'll see you the next time.